What's up everyone, welcome to another episode. Today I want to talk to you about my first ride impressions of my custom titanium frame and also compare it to the ride feel and experience that I got from my steel Standert Triebwerk, which was the foundation of the geometry for this titanium build. So let's kick things off with a quick summary of the titanium build and overall cost, as this was something that was coming up a couple of times in the comment section of the build. So if you're not interested in this, feel free to use the chapter markers just to jump ahead. Now let's start with the frame. As you might know, it is a custom titanium frame made by a company called Waltly, so built in China. And I asked them to do some double butted tubing on the top and on the down tube to keep it, I would say, as light as possible. I also asked them to design this and build this with an integrated FSA headset and of course a nice carbon fork with integrated routing. All of this together came out at $1,765 including shipping, and as the rest of the cost that we're going to be discussing is going to be in euros, so I would say let's call this generously 1,600 euros. So next up there's going to be the SRAM Red ETAP group set, which I mounted on here. So as the new SRAM group set was about to come out, when I was purchasing this group set, I was able to score a really good deal on I would say a partial group set containing the shifters, the brakes, derailleurs and the disc, and the discs multiple, and all of this together was only 1,200 euros. I'm saying only because if you look at the prices of the new SRAM Red group set, this was rather a bargain. So aside of these parts, I decided to ride this group with a Shimano 12-speed cassette to keep my wheels and group sets as compatible as possible across the bikes that I have. So I went for an Ultegra 12-speed cassette after first trying a lightweight AliExpress cassette, but somehow I couldn't get the indexing there just right. So I mean, if you've seen my build video, you've seen this also in the indexing part of that video, that we still had a couple of gear combinations which didn't really shift as smooth as I would expect it from a top tier group set. So with that Ultegra cassette, everything was buttery smooth. So that Ultegra cassette was actually 93 euros. And I was also fitting a nice 12-speed Ultegra chain matching this cassette, which was 32 euros and 50 cents. I also decided to ditch the SRAM discs, and I went for some lighter weight discs from a company called Galfer. I went with the 160 millimeters in the front, 140 millimeters in the back, and those both together ended up being 94 euros. To complete this group set, I still needed a crankset, so for this I went to my favorite website for Chinese bike parts called Panda Podium and purchased a nice Cybrake carbon crankset with aluminum chainrings. So this one did cost $629, so let's call this 580 euros. To mount that Standard crankset, I needed a T47 bottom bracket, and here I took also the one from Standard, which I already built or used on my Standert Triebwerk, of course. This one did cost 40 euros, which I think is a pretty good deal given the prices for the other T47 bottom brackets. And let's stay with Panda Podium. Also here I went for an integrated handlebar from a company called Evian, and I selected their Canary handlebar because it is only 260 grams for the size that I needed, so 400 by 110, and it is rather reasonably priced at $299, so let's call it 275 euros for that one. Now next, for the saddle and seat post, I took my lightweight Darimo T1 loop seat post, which I took from another build of mine, which did cost 299 euros, and I paired it with the Prologo Dimension 143 NUC edition, so the lightweight version of that saddle with nice and carbon rails, and also has a little bit of padding on it, and this saddle did cost me 157 euros and 50 cents. And now, aside from the supercars bar tape for 34 euros and 50 cents, we just add the wheels now, and should be actually done with this part. And in the build video, I was using my Elite Wheels drive wheels with their nice mixed depth configuration. So I had 50 millimeters in the front and 65 millimeters in the back. I paired these with my favorite tires, so 28 millimeters Conti GP 5000. So the wheels came in at 1,158 US dollars, so let's say 1,100 euros, and the tires came in at 84 euros 50 in the pair, together with some inner tubes already. So if I did the math right, this now brings the overall build to 5,590 euros, which I think it is a lot of money, but it is quite okay, I think, for something that for me personally feels like a super bike and something that's motivating to get me out. All right, but now let's talk about the way how this thing rides. So overall, when you browse the internet, you hear and read how steel and especially titanium frames smoothen out bumps and the general harshness of the road. I already experienced this with my first steel bike, which was the Dacordi frame that you might know from one of my first builds on this channel. There is really something to it, especially when you come from a very stiff carbon or even aluminum frame. You really can notice the difference here. So yeah, no surprise. Also with this titanium bike, it nicely filters and smoothens out those road vibrations. But I just want to be clear, in case you have never ridden a titanium or a steel frame before, it's not like a magic carpet where suddenly your ride feels like you're riding on an indoor trainer, even though you're going over like rather rough roads outside. I would maybe rather compare it to the feeling if you're installing slightly wider tires on your bike and running them at slightly lower tire pressure. Of course, that effect is going to be amplified if you mix wider tires and lower tire pressures with a steel or titanium bike. But yeah, in general, I just wanted to set the expectations here, at least from what I was able to feel. So it definitely is smoother, but of course, don't expect a magic carpet where, suddenly gravel becomes like freshly laid tarmac. So I rode a bunch of different routes with this frame now, including lots and lots of climbs in Mallorca recently. And even with this frame not being the lightest at around 1.8 kilograms, which you already know as you've watched my bike build video of this, I assume, it was definitely light enough to get up all those hills there. And talking about descending of those hills, I have to say this is now my favorite descender at the moment. It feels super, super confident. I feel very well connected with the road, and with this 110 millimeter long stem and the 400 millimeter wide handlebars, it gave me, I would say, the perfect mix between having enough stability and also agile enough handling whenever I needed it to be agile. So also, while the frame is by design a little bit on the small side for my height, I would say, and it would definitely not pass the you should not see your front hub when you're in your neutral riding position kind of test, because I can very clearly see my hub whenever I'm riding either in the drops or up in the hoods. But it still gives me the most comfortable ride and a very nice weight distribution of around 55% of my weight on the rear and 45% on the front when I'm in the drops, of course, which I think is a pretty good and stable distribution, at least as far as I heard it from digging through some Reddit threads and so on and so forth. But if you know more about this topic, please let me know down in the comments, because this is something that's very new to me with all those details. And I would love to understand it a little bit better, what kind of impact those weight distributions and kind of positions on the bike have here. So drop it in the comments and help me to get a better understanding here. So how does this titanium bike compare to the Standert Triebwerk, which has been the bike that I've been enjoying riding the most recently? And as the geometry has been very closely modeled after the Triebwerk, I have to say that I don't think I would be able to distinguish both frames in a blind test. So both rides feel so similar that yeah, I think for me it would be easier to distinguish or differentiate or feel the difference of I would say a super stiff carbon spoked wheel set compared to a steel spoked wheel set in a blind test. But the frame itself, to me as the casual rider that I am, I would not place any bets on being able to differentiate the two frames in a blind test, even though I would clearly be able to differentiate the Dura-Ace shifting performance from that SRAM Red shifting performance and that group set. I mean, it is just a side note, and I really loved how easy it was to install the SRAM Red group set, but especially the front derailleur shifting isn't even in the same league as the Dura-Ace one, and there is no trim on that front derailleur. Yep. But anyways, the two frames riding the same is actually not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing, I have to say, because as I said, I really loved the ride feel that the Triebwerk was giving me. But I can still call the titanium bike my number one at this point. And this actually has nothing to do with how the ride feels, but rather with the benefits of titanium as a material in itself. So yeah, let's quickly zoom out and take a step back. I initially started exploring steel in the very beginning because of the fact that I was worrying about carbon being a little bit too fragile, at least for me. I was often traveling by car with my bike, and then the bike being either on the roof or in the trunk, and I was always very careful to not scratch the paint or to not accidentally drop any other luggage that might be traveling with me in the trunk on the frame, causing some crack that you might not see, blah 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 blah. Same thing at coffee stops, actually always being a little bit worried about the bike potentially falling over, donging against something, and then me thinking some small damage underneath the paint job will cause the bike to fail during a quick descent. So I know that this might sound a little bit over dramatic, but these have just been the main reasons for me also not to buy any super expensive carbon bike, because even though I really enjoy the looks of those super high-end carbon bikes, it always felt a little bit too fragile for me to drop some major cash on them and then always being worried that it might get damaged. So then first of all, I went for steel, thinking that even if something drops on it or causes a dent, I will most likely be able to still have a safe ride afterwards. And even if some tubes get really heavily damaged, I'll be able to get just that tube swapped out and will be able to continue riding that bike. So even throwing it into my trunk suddenly got way easier for me, I would say, emotionally. And it felt more sustainable, of course, which was a nice side effect. So being able to upcycle old bikes like the Dacordi one, which most likely would have been a bike or a bike frame that would be sitting in some landfill already if it would have been a carbon bike from the year 2000. So yes, I got all that security with steel, but for me, titanium really adds that cherry on top of everything and makes this the most carefree bike, I would say, that I own at the moment, because I can ride this titanium frame completely unpainted, so I don't even need to worry about any paint chopping off, because you still have that with steel, because normally those steel bikes are painted if you don't have a stainless steel frame. So now with this titanium one, even if it dongs against something, I don't really care, because there is no paint to be chipped off on top of there. And then also there's the topic of rust. So even though you can, of course, impregnate your steel frames from the inside against rust, this is still something that you have to remember and requires a little bit of effort. For example, like taking out the bottom bracket so that you can get with those impregnation sprays into every corner. And with titanium, you basically have a bike that needs as much maintenance as a carbon one, but it can last a lifetime and you don't really have to worry too much about it. And completely independent of all of that, I think that this raw metal look is just beautiful to look at, and also a great ego booster in general if you are overtaking somebody on their carbon aero superbike, which costs, I guess, 2 or 3 times the amount of your classic looking rather heavier setup. it always puts an extra wide smile on my face whenever that happens. And also, if you're being overtaken by one of those high-end aero bikes, you can always blame it on being more of a purist rider. So I would say it's a pretty good joker from both perspectives, riding a titanium bike. But let's talk about performance for a bit. So while I don't know too much about bike geometry, which is why I modeled this bike after the Standert, which is or should be an all-in race geometry, I would say. But of course, due to its round tube shapes, it will never be as aerodynamic as a highly aero-optimized carbon frame is going to be. So if you want to go fast with this, I think it's even more important to pick some nice deep section aero wheels with this bike. And that's why for the first rides I paired this bike up with my Elite Wheels drive wheels in this nice mixed depth configuration with 50 millimeters on the front, 65 millimeters on the back. And I even left these on the bike for my Mallorca trip, as I wanted to be able to compare the ride feel to the Standert, which I just took to Mallorca on the recent trip before, also riding the Elite Wheels drives in their 50-50 millimeter configuration, because I didn't have that 65 millimeter rear wheel back in the day. So now the main question is, would I recommend anybody of you to go onto this Waltly adventure and get a custom titanium bike? So if you're not somebody who needs the lightest bike possible, or whose main focus riding is to collect as many comms as possible, I would say absolutely yes. I think it's only important that you either have a reference frame that you feel comfortable on riding and that already feels pretty much on point, where you only want to tweak a couple of parameters, or there are actually no bikes out there that you feel comfortable riding because of your proportions potentially, or your body ratios. Then I would recommend to just do professional bike fit, take all that data and bring it to Waltly, and I would say that they will support you on building the frame that makes you feel very comfortable and perfect for you. And this bike just brings me so much fun. It's so much pure joy while riding, and a nice side effect is that it also eliminates a lot of this elitist BS that you sometimes have to deal with, depending on into what kind of cyclists you run into during your coffee stop. I mean, a custom titanium bike gives you instant street cred that even the fanciest, and now you can insert any expensive major Western brand that you now think of, that kind of rider is not going to doubt the worthiness of your existence during one of those coffee stops. So what's going to come up next with this titanium project? I still want to get some weight optimization going and try out some new wheels, swap out some heavy components for some lighter ones that I have flying around or that are just in the mail right now, and see how much weight I will still be able to squeeze out from here without completely breaking the bank. And with that, I would say we're already coming to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button, and feel free to let me know your thoughts on on this build, and what do you think about titanium? Is titanium something that you've been thinking about recently, or do you think that this is very overhyped and kind of like the new aero sock at the moment? Just drop it down in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. And as always, I would say thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.